Ethan froze the moment he opened the drawer and realized the Rolex his father had left him was gone. It wasn't just a watch. It was the last physical memory of the man who raised him. His mind raced as he searched the apartment, hoping it had somehow been misplaced, but the truth settled in like a punch to the stomach. Madison had taken it. He remembered her sudden shopping bags, the new designer heels, the vague excuses about borrowing money for their wedding. When he checked the security box and found it empty, the betrayal felt sharper than anything he'd ever known. Then came the confirmation. She had sold it to her cousin Tyler's pawn shop without a word. Ethan's hands trembled, not from anger alone, but from the realization that the person he planned to marry had crossed a line he could never ignore. And at that moment, he knew he had to call the police. Ethan stood in the living room, staring at the empty spot on the shelf, where he used to keep the documents for his father's Rolex. His pulse was still unsteady from discovering the watch had been sold, and now he needed proof, something solid, something undeniable. He pulled out the worn leather folder, flipping through the papers with shaking fingers until he found the certificate of ownership, the receipt from his father's estate, and the appraisal forms confirming its value. Each page felt like another stab of reality, reminding him that the betrayal wasn't imagined. It was documented. It was real. Madison was at her desk at the real estate office when two uniformed officers walked in and asked for her by name. Her coworkers turned in surprise as she stood up, pale and trembling, trying to force a smile. When the cuffs clicked around her wrists, the room fell silent. She begged the officers to let her call Ethan, insisting the whole thing was a misunderstanding, but they told her she would get her phone call at the station. As they guided her out, she kept repeating his name under her breath, as if saying it could save her. Ethan's phone began ringing before he even knew what time it was. The screen lit up with her name once, twice, 3 times, then switched to a number he didn't recognize. He let it ring. He knew exactly where she was calling from. He stared at the phone vibrating on the kitchen counter, each buzz tugging at a part of him that still cared, still remembered the good days, but he didn't pick up. He couldn't. The line had been crossed long before the arrest. The calls didn't stop. Then came the messages, voicemails full of tears and rushed apologies, promises that she would fix everything if he just showed up or made a statement. Ethan deleted each one, without listening fully. Every word felt like a trap, pulling him back into a place he refused to return. That evening, there was a violent pounding on the front door. Ethan opened it to find Karen, Madison's mother, red-faced and livid. Behind her stood Olivia, arms crossed, and Robert, hanging back but clearly dragged there against his will. Karen shoved her way inside before he could speak. "How could you do this to my daughter?" she screamed, her voice shrill with rage. Ethan stepped back, stunned by the audacity. "She stole from me," he said quietly. "She sold something that wasn't hers." Olivia chimed in immediately, rolling her eyes. "You're ruining her life over a stupid watch. People lose things all the time. Just drop the charges." Robert didn't say much, but the way he avoided eye contact told Ethan he understood more than he was willing to admit. Still, he let Karen speak for the family as she stormed around the living room, pointing at pictures and belongings as if trying to find more reasons to accuse him. The argument escalated quickly. Karen shouted that Ethan had manipulated Madison, that he was cold and selfish, that he didn't deserve her. When she got close enough to jab a finger into his chest, Ethan stepped back and warned her to leave. Karen only got louder. She yelled so hard her voice cracked, and Olivia added fuel by recording the confrontation on her phone, narrating dramatically as if they were the victims. Even Grandma Helen arrived moments later with Robert, clutching her handbag and claiming her heart was acting up because of the stress. Ethan recognized the performance immediately. The shouting grew so intense that neighbors began peering through their windows. Someone must have called the police, because soon flashing lights lit up the street. 2 officers arrived and forced the family to step outside. Karen tried to argue with them too, insisting it was all a misunderstanding, but the officers warned her that continued disruption would result in charges. Eventually, the family dispersed, but not without Karen shouting that Ethan would regret ruining their daughter's life. When the door finally shut and silence returned, Ethan leaned against the wall, exhausted. In less than 24 hours, his life had spun into chaos, all because of a choice Madison made, and a truth she refused to face. He knew things were only beginning, and the storm ahead would be far worse than anything that had come so far. The investigation into the stolen Rolex expanded faster than anyone expected. Detectives obtained a warrant to search Tyler's pawn shop, and by early morning they arrived with a full team. Customers were asked to leave as officers taped off the entrance and began pulling items from display cases. What began as a recovery of one stolen watch quickly escalated when they uncovered dozens of suspicious valuables, jewelry with scratched-off engravings, electronics still logged to other owners, even high-end handbags with security tags intact. Tyler tried to explain everything away, claiming he bought items as is, but the detectives weren't buying it. They found his inventory logs sloppy, inconsistent, and in some cases non-existent. The more they searched, the more it became painfully clear that Tyler's pawn shop was a hub for stolen goods. Madison's second arrest seemed to push her into desperation, and the moment she was released on bail again, she launched a crowdfunding page titled, "Help Me Escape Financial Abuse." The description was long, emotional, and filled with half-truths designed to make strangers pity her. She claimed Ethan controlled her money, refused to support her, and forced her into impossible decisions. She wrote about the wedding expenses, her stress, and how she felt pressured to contribute more than she could afford. Buried in that emotional chaos, however, was a series of statements that would come back to destroy her. She wrote openly about selling the Rolex to protect our future together. She mentioned withdrawing it from Ethan's place without telling him because he wouldn't have let me if I asked. She even tried to justify it by calling it a shared asset, completely ignoring the legal documents Ethan had already given the police. Ethan read the page twice, stunned at how carelessly she had admitted to the theft in her attempt to paint herself as the victim. He screenshotted every line and forwarded the entire link to the prosecutor. Within minutes, he received a message back confirming it would be added to her growing list of evidence. The fundraiser didn't go the way Madison expected. People online didn't rush to donate. Instead, they dug through her previous posts, comparing timelines, pointing out contradictions, and questioning why someone claiming abuse had spent money on designer heels days before being arrested. A few donations trickled in, but comments flooded the page calling her manipulative, dramatic, and dishonest. She kept deleting negative posts, but more appeared every hour. It was spiraling, and she couldn't stop it. Around this time, Ethan received an unexpected knock on his door. It was Robert, Madison's father, standing alone without Karen or Olivia. He looked exhausted, shoulders slumped, as if he'd aged years in just a few days. Ethan let him in cautiously, unsure of his intentions. Robert sat at the edge of the couch, holding his hands together, searching for words before finally speaking. He apologized for his family's behavior, for the chaos, for the yelling and accusations. But then his voice dropped to a quiet, almost defeated tone. He revealed something Ethan never expected to hear. Madison had a long history of stealing. Small things at first, cosmetics accessories, cash left out at home. Karen always covered for her, insisted it was just a phase, and pressured the family not to embarrass her. Over the years, the habit grew into something more serious. Robert confessed that he had tried to address it, tried to set boundaries, but Madison and Karen shut him out, turning every confrontation into an attack on him instead. He said he couldn't live like that anymore. The arrest, the lies, the public spectacle, it was the breaking point. He told Ethan he had already contacted a lawyer and planned to file for divorce. There was no anger in his voice, only resignation, as if he had carried the weight of this truth for far too long. Ethan sat quietly, absorbing everything. It didn't excuse Madison's actions, but it explained how she had become the person who could sell something so meaningful without remorse. When Robert finally left, he thanked Ethan for listening and apologized again. Ethan closed the door softly, feeling the heavy echo of the truth settle into the room. The situation was no longer just a legal case or a breakup. It was a lifetime of dysfunction unraveling in front of him, and all he could do was hold steady as everything collapsed around Madison and her family. The courtroom was packed the morning Madison's trial began. Reporters weren't allowed inside, but the whispers in the hallway made it clear people had been following every twist since the pawn shop raid. Ethan sat quietly in the back, not because he wanted to be there, but because the prosecutor asked him to attend in case additional testimony was needed. He kept his eyes on the floor as Madison was led in by deputies, dressed in a modest blouse, as if the right outfit could erase months of chaos. She searched the room immediately, her eyes settling on Ethan with a mixture of hurt and accusation, but he didn't meet her gaze. The aftermath of the trial settled over everyone like a slow, heavy fog. Madison's life changed instantly the moment the sentence was read, and the cracks in her world began spreading in every direction. She moved back into her childhood, home the same afternoon she was released, dragging a single suitcase behind her. Karen greeted her with open arms and frantic sympathy, but even in Madison's exhausted state, she could sense something different. The house felt tense, brittle, as if every wall carried the weight of unspoken blame. Robert no longer lived there. He had moved out the week before the trial, staying with a friend while finalizing the divorce paperwork. His absence lingered in the house like a missing piece of furniture. Madison tried not to think about the fact that her father left because of her, but it clung to her mind no matter how hard she pushed it away. Karen insisted he was overreacting, painting him as the villain, but deep down Madison knew the truth. Her father had finally reached a breaking point after years of pretending everything was normal. With a criminal record, Madison lost her job almost immediately. Her real estate license was suspended pending further review, and no brokerage wanted to be associated with someone who had gone viral for theft and fraud. The only work she could find was at a crowded call center, where she spent hours reciting scripted greetings to irritated customers. The fluorescent lights and constant ringing phones felt like punishment, a constant reminder of how far she had fallen. Her coworkers recognized her from the mugshot that had circulated online. Some whispered. Some snickered. She kept her head down and tried not to cry in the restroom during breaks. Meanwhile, Olivia tried to capitalize on the drama by launching a podcast called Living with Liars, My Family's True Story. She uploaded 3 episodes full of exaggerated stories, self-righteous monologues, and heavily biased insider details. But the podcast barely reached more than a few dozen listens, most from curious people who wanted to mock it. Olivia insisted the world just wasn't ready for her truth, but Madison knew the real reason. No one cared. The audience she imagined simply didn't exist. Grandma Helen, of course, leaned into every moment of attention the scandal brought. She claimed her heart problems were acting up, insisted she needed special care, and dramatically clutched her chest each time someone mentioned the trial. But the theatrics had lost their shine. Even Karen began sighing impatiently when Helen started her usual performances. The entire household felt trapped in a loop of stress, denial, and resentment, and Madison was at the center of it, unable to escape, unable to fix what she had broken. Ethan's life, however, took a different trajectory. He returned to a quieter routine, rebuilding the stability that had been shaken for months. He kept his phone silent, avoided social media, and focused on work. The watch, once a painful symbol of betrayal, was now carefully stored in a secure safe, polished and protected, just as his father would have wanted. For Ethan, it wasn't about material value. It was about memory, legacy, and respect. Eventually, he began seeing someone new. Her name was Jenna, a warm and steady presence who never pushed him to share more than he was ready to. Their connection grew slowly, naturally, born from calm conversations and mutual trust. Being with her felt nothing like the emotional minefield he had survived. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt peace. As weeks turned into months, the noise around the scandal faded. People found new stories to gossip about, new dramas to latch onto. Madison became just another cautionary tale, whispered in smaller and smaller circles. Ethan didn't celebrate her downfall, nor did he dwell on it. He simply accepted the truth. Sometimes protecting your boundaries means letting people face the consequences they created. By the time spring arrived, the chaos of the past year felt distant. Ethan stood by the window of his apartment one morning, sunlight streaming in, and realized he no longer felt anger or fear or exhaustion. Only clarity. Only strength. The watch in his safe was more than a keepsake. It was a reminder of the moment he chose integrity, even when it cost him everything he thought he had. And as he stepped toward a new chapter of his life, he knew he had made the right choice. Spring settled quietly over the city, softening the edges of everything that had once felt sharp and overwhelming. Ethan walked through the park one late afternoon, noticing how peaceful the world seemed compared to the turmoil he had survived. He felt lighter, as if the final remnants of the past had finally loosened their grip on him. The watch remained locked safely away, not as a wound, but as a reminder of resilience. Madison's name rarely came up anymore, fading from conversations just as quickly as her scandal had faded from the public eye. Ethan no longer felt bitterness toward her, only a distant understanding that some people simply weren't meant to stay in his life. He didn't wish her harm. He didn't wish her success either. He simply wished to move forward without the weight of what had happened. Jenna met him at the edge of the park, her smile calm and familiar. She slipped her hand into his, grounding him in a way that felt both steady and hopeful. Together they continued down the path, the late sunlight stretching long and golden across the grass. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt truly certain. The past had shaped him, but it no longer defined him. And what lay ahead was his to build, quiet, honest, and entirely his own.